The Lone Ranger is a movie that I grew up on, and I rewatched it quite literally like just then. I just finished rewatching it, and it is really good. No wonder I loved it so much as a kid. However, it is also not only Disney's second biggest box office flop, it is the second biggest flop of all time. This movie started, sort of arousing at around 2002, 3? Right about those times is when they started writing, they started bringing directors in, and they started to consider casting. But alas, none of this really worked, and they went through a bunch of directors until like 2008 when they brought on Gore Verbinski? Is that his name? Same guy that directed Pirates of the Caribbean, the first three. It was back in like 2003 when they started talking about bringing in Johnny Depp for the role in The Lone Ranger, and then by 2008 he had officially been cast by Gore, and after they finished filming On Stranger Tides, Johnny Depp went straight into filming The Lone Ranger. This movie was given around about a $90 million budget, and whilst making the film, it skyrocketed up to $150 million. Holy crap. They surpassed their budget. I think they went up to $150 million, and they came back down, and then they went back up because shooting was a whole other process. Apparently they were way behind schedule and whatnot, and just so much, inconsistencies happened on set, which was not a good thing. This movie it was $90 million in the US for box office and 200 and something worldwide. Disney clocked this in at about a $150 to $190 million loss, which is just so much money. And I wanted to research this because I had no idea why this movie lost so much money, and now I do. At the time that this movie came out, 2013 is when it released, it had so much more competition surrounding it. Despicable Me 2 came out at the same time, it had a much lower budget and it did so much better. The Lone Ranger was a property from like 1950 and no one really knew what it was except for old people back then. Even there were controversies around casting Johnny Depp as Tonto, which what? Apparently that put people off watching the movie. Okay, don't get me wrong, this movie has some really racist parts in it, but it's Disney. They just blatantly disguise racism. They didn't do it very well in this movie. This movie is also absolutely smashed by critics, which doesn't really make sense, because guess what? This movie is good, and I'm going to be going through it and explaining what I like and what I don't like. It might be nostalgia, probably nostalgia, but alas, let's get into The Lone Ranger. Hold on. This movie has a very simple plot point, and it expands the story so much when there's twists and turns, and there's a subplot, and it's all handled very well. It's a simple revenge story, which I'll get into the lore, once I start reviewing the movie. Revenge is used lightly, it's sort of spoiler free, it's more of a justice movie, bringing someone to justice, and then there's a whole nother subplot that I can't really get into without spoiling it, so if you haven't seen this over 10-year-old movie now, go and watch it, it's really good, and if you have, then let's get into the review of The Lone Ranger. This movie technically starts with a little kid going into a circus and finding Tonto the Indian. The movie refers to him as an Indian, so that is what I'm going to be referring to him as. So this kid goes into a circus and sees an exhibition, and Tonto's there, and it's sort of like a Forrest Gump situation where Tonto just tells the story of the Lone Ranger. We see early on in this movie that there is a train track being built, and the Lone Ranger, before he is the Lone Ranger, is on this train track. We find that he is not a religious man, and then all of a sudden this train is being robbed. And the reason why this train is being robbed is because the antagonist of this film, Butch, is on this train. Butch is an outlaw cannibal that people have been chasing for many years, and he is very crucial to the plot. Alongside Butch in his railway cart is Tonto. Now Tonto, straight off the bat, is very strange. Anyway, long story short, Butch's gang succeeds in stealing Butch from the train before Butch can get hanged, which is what he's on the train for. And ultimately, it's up to Tonto and the Lone Ranger to separate the trains, because now the train is going full speed across tracks that haven't been built yet, and it's only going to crash. There's nothing they can do about it. So they separate the trains, the passengers are free, and now Tonto and the Lone Ranger are on this train together, and it crashes. Tonto is seen like he's going to leave everything, but then the Lone Ranger's brother shows up, and the Lone Ranger's brother is with a group of forcemen. Tonto is sent to jail, and he escapes without any explanation. It's funny, they do that on purpose. The Lone Ranger is not an outlaw, he is not a lawman, he's not a horseback rider, a cowboy if you will. And his brother, who is all of those things, wants the Lone Ranger to tag along with him as his official lawman, as the Lone Ranger has studied law. With this, the Lone Ranger tags along with his brother among 6 other rangers. Now these 7 rangers are very important. There is a peace treaty that we see at the start of the film where Indians and white men, as they're called in the film, I know it's a treaty where these two people can live in peace together, in harmony together. Everyone can get along without, having to worry. And these 7 rangers pretty much pioneered it, if you will. They go after Butch because now Butch has escaped, and then they get into this big canyon, this massive canyon, and they get hunted down, shot, and killed. Now in this scene, there is some beautiful scenery, really good locations, but ultimately 6 of the rangers die. The Lone Ranger and his brother both get shot, and the Lone Ranger tries to pull his brother to safety. From there, Butch comes down, rips his heart out, eats his heart as the Lone Ranger watches, and there, the peace treaty is destroyed. This is where the subplot sort of spikes up, and I think it's really cool and really well written. It's not like the main focus of the film, and it's not like an obvious center of attention thing. It's just happening alongside the revenge story. Now this revenge story starts to happen when Tonto comes and he buries all the rangers. However, there is a spirit horse that tells Tonto that the Lone Ranger is not in fact dead, and so these two ultimately team up and they go out and try and hunt Butch. So now that the story's kicked off, it's really basic, it's really, fun. We start the Lone Ranger and Tonto character development. These two do not work well together as a team, and that's why on screen they work so well together as a team. Their relationship is not at all, smooth, and it is not at all a good one. They both are very controversial of each other. One believes something should happen for this reason, and the other believes the same thing should happen but for a different reason. And it's really cool seeing these two just, sort of have these disagreements on screen. It's really fun to see these two react with each other. Tonto is hilarious. The Lone Ranger starts to make a name of himself accidentally by killing 2 of Butch's men. Accidentally. He fires a warning shot and it inevitably kills 2 of his men. And so the word gets out that the Lone Ranger has killed 2 men with 1 bullet. Butch has captive the Lone Ranger's sister-in-law, who he is in love with, and her son. And so the Lone Ranger goes out and tracks Butch again, whilst Tonto is tracking Butch for the slaughter of his tribe. Now there's a little cute subplot, another one with Tonto, and it gives us reasoning. We see throughout the movie that if a man dies and Tonto takes something from this dead person, that Tonto will give them something from his person. It's a trade. We see a flashback of when Tonto is a kid, and there are 2 men damaged, and he brings them back to his tribe. They raise them, and then these 2 white men, see silver in the river in the tribe, and they tell Tonto to tell them where it is. He does that, and in return, they give him a pocket watch. This is what I liked about the movie. It gives us reasoning as to why Tonto is the way he is. He's not normal, and he knows nothing better. Now he just trades. We later learn in the movie that these 2 people are actually brothers. One of them is Butch, and the other is Cole, the person who is responsible for building all the train tracks. So now that this story has so much more depth into it, the hunt for Butch becomes so much more serious. Eventually the Lone Ranger and Tonto catch up to Butch in this really cool mine, really nice coloring and really nice setting. Once they catch up to Butch, the interrogation starts. The Lone Ranger wants to bring him into justice, and Tonto wants to kill him for slaughtering his entire tribe. This is where the controversy sparks between the Lone Ranger and Tonto. The Lone Ranger doesn't let Tonto shoot Butch. Instead, he knocks out Tonto and he brings Butch to Cole, and he says, here's the man that you're looking for. So Cole has tricked the Lone Ranger, and then everyone turns their guns on the Lone Ranger. We learn that the slaughtering of the other Indian tribes, now that the treaty has been broken, was all for nothing. It was just, a big double cross. So from there, the Lone Ranger is captured and he is sent to death by shooting range. Is that what they call it? Tonto saves him. They get a bunch of explosives, they blow up the big bridge that the train is set to charter on. And then towards the end of the movie, there is a big bridge fight, and it is so over the top and slapstick, very Lone Ranger style, and you can see Gore just directing his best. He's making his statement. It's very Pirates of the Caribbean style fun, and you can see that on screen. And by the end of it, long story short, Cole stays on the train with all this silver that they stole from where Tonto said there was silver. Cole and the train full of silver goes down where the bridge originally was that Tonto and Lone Ranger exploded, and he dies. Now, this movie did a lot of things very well. Building their characters, they did that extremely well. The settings that they made, they did that extremely well. The CGI, the cinematography, the setting, the coloring, everything, the costuming. Obviously, because this movie just skyrocketed its price, and it didn't really need to do that, but we got a beautiful looking movie out of it. One thing that I didn't like about the Lone Ranger as a character is before he was a Lone Ranger, they kind of treated him like a dumb sort of rock. He was a goody two-shoes, but they took that to another level, whereas like, oh, a goody two-shoes wouldn't know what this is, he would think it's another thing. Gore is a very good director because this movie, much like the pirate movies, had those really long sections of scenes, and you could think back to the movie and be like, oh yeah, I remember that happened that long ago, and oh yeah, that was really cool. I really like when directors do this sort of thing, because then after a movie you can reminisce back on it and it's not forgetful. It really stands out, and that's what makes scenes so iconic in movies. So yeah, this movie definitely gets hated on more than it needs to. I love it. I absolutely love it. Let me know what you guys think. I do read a lot of reviews. When I was researching this, there was a lot popping up about don't listen to critics. This is a very good movie and they're just being, you know, critical like critics do. This, once again, was one of Disney's biggest flops, and I just wanted to explain why I like it so much. It's very strange that I do. But besides that, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think, and have a good day.